Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pope Metallicus, and welcome back to Rock and Roll Religion, where we've got a pretty cool topic for you today. We're talking about one of the big names in the thrash metal scene, one of the big four, in fact. We've already done early Metallica, we've already done a couple others. We've never touched these guys yet, so I think it's time we change that. And let's get into some Megadeth, because they're probably one of my favorites out of this group, and certainly have had one of the most impacts in the entire thrash metal genre. So we will get into that in a second. Let's see who's here. Ruben Christopher Haynes, good to see you, man. And Christian Delorme, as always. Always glad to have you guys here. And Soul Assassin, too. Oh, man, I can't wait to hear what you guys think of this, because early Megadeth is pretty savage and really raw. I really dig it. So without further ado, let's get into this. So as you guys probably know, Dave Mustaine started out as the lead guitarist for Metallica before getting kicked out for various substance abuse issues and personal abuse issues. I believe he got in a fight with a couple of the other members, including James. So he got kicked out of Metallica and was just kind of really pissed off at the world and looking to start a new band. And then he met David Ellefson in LA in, I believe, 83. And, they started forming a core of a band together. And then what popped out in 1985 was this right here. Killing is my business, and killing is, or in business is good. Starting a long trend of really cynical and ironic album titles from these guys, and also giving us Vic Rattlehead, which is the second most iconic heavy metal mascot behind Eddie from Iron Maiden, because you can't top it. And yeah, so Dave was, I think, a little too hardcore for the Metallica guys. Those guys were musicians who wanted to play something loud and aggressive, and that was what they were going for. But I think they wanted to go in a more melodic direction and more musically progressive. And Dave was just pissed off and wanted everyone to know it. So that's where that came from. And it really shows in here with some of the tracks on this record, which, holy shit. Last Rites is great. Title track. They're all pretty awesome. Mechanics, if you guys are Metallica fans, you will recognize where that riff came from. And anyone else would say that that's ripped off, but we all know that the riff for Mechanics was written by Dave and taken by Metallica for the Four Horsemen. So it's one of those, like, both sides get a writing credit for it. So penalties offset, first down. But really a great intro to this band, and kind of indicative of their later stuff. It's a little raw, it's a little unproduced, and that's a good thing for thrash. When you tend to try to really overproduce stuff and get a little too fancy with thrash metal, it tends to, well, sound like later Metallica, and we all know how that goes. But super aggressive. You can tell there's a lot of influence from the black metal genre in here on this early release. Just like the rest of the big four, these guys were super influenced by bands like Venom, and it shows in that aggression, that tremolo picking, that more focus on speed and aggression rather than melody, which came to be in, like, Thrash's calling card is just fast and out of control. And it shows here. And you can only say so many good things about these records. For a band that had never done something before, even this wasn't Dave's first rodeo, it really shows that there is a talent behind this band, and they know what they want to do. And according to Dave, that was pretty much be the angriest band on earth at the time, and I think they succeeded in that. But you know, the question is is not usually the first output, because a lot of bands we talked about, they had a great first couple of record, maybe two, and then most of them kind of peter out. The real ones, it's how they follow it up, and they followed it up with possibly one of the greatest heavy metal records ever recorded in Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? Another absolutely iconic album. I think every metalhead I've ever talked to owns this record, including myself. It's one of those seminal records that you kind of have to own. And for all the right reasons, too. I mean, it's everything Megadeth does right. And really, it's a testament to the fact that their formula works. When Dave and Dave essentially really get going, really just get down to the roots of an album and just do what they do, Megadeth is fucking stellar. At least in this period. I think they lose that a little bit later on into the 90s, but that's because it was metal in the 90s. You're going to have that. And again, this is the mid 80s. I think this album came out in 86. So the height of the thrash movement, everybody's coming out with killer content. So for this to stand out among all the other great artists that were coming out with material, I think this is the same year Master of Puppets was released. So either there was something in the water in the Bay Area, which is entirely possible given how they turned out, or these guys are just super talented and really able to get their message across in a very concise way. I mean, you have some of their all-time classics on here. You have Peace Sells. Sorry, I couldn't get a better picture of that one, but you've got all sorts of stuff on here for that. Let's see if I can find a better picture of it here and put that up. I don't have a great picture of the rear covers, unfortunately. But, oh yeah, that was one of the best things with thrash Soul Assassin is they were everyday guys complaining about the shit we were all mad about, of basically being a young guy freaking trying to make it in the world and getting constantly beat down on for things that ain't your fault, or things that you're doing. One of my favorite lines in this is, what do you mean I don't pay my bills? Why do you think I'm broke? That is one of those songs that really encapsulates Megadeth at its heart. Dave being a cynical bastard, that really heavy bass riff, and just absolute killer rhythm guitar work. And the leads on this are not bad either. I believe they had Marty Friedman by this time, so he's one of the greatest metal guitarists of all time. If you guys have seen Rust in Peace, which we'll do a whole video on by itself because that album deserves it. That when Dave is working with another brilliant guitarist, they just leave the freaking earth. And part of the rule of being the lead guitarist for Megadeth is you have to be better than Dave, who used to be Metallica's lead guitarist. The man's no slouch. And he really can find some talent out there. And the rest of the band isn't bad as well. I forget they at this point they were using kind of a revolving door of drummers, because they kept either A, stealing equipment, or B, having heroin addictions and getting kicked out of the band, which is really interesting coming from Dave, or just being part of the scene. Or a lot of bands go through this period where they're kind of trying to find a full lineup that works for them, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, Metallica has been pretty much static since they started. unfortunately, with the exception of Cliff Burton. But it happens, especially in the thrash scene. Like guys will just like constantly orbit around the scene. Like trying to think of a good example of that, but guys like Dave Lombardo are a perfect example where he's been in like 4 bands since Slayer, and occasionally you'll see them pop back into the bands they started with. I know a couple of members of Exodus have gone and come back and then gone again or whatever. It's just kind of this one big pool of musicians that everyone's drawn from, and they all work with each other too. Me and Imperatus have talked about this in the black metal scene, where in addition to like the main band that they're all known for, like so and so will play guitar in this band with the singer from Emperor or whoever, and then it'll just be this who also plays in 3 other bands, and it's this whole big artistic movement. And it's a good thing, and it's also a bad thing in that sometimes it does dilute the creativity, not in terms of bringing down the quality of the product. It's just that everything starts to sound the same after a while because everyone's working with the same guys. So obviously the finished product is going to be more similar to each other after that because they're all being influenced by the same thing, which at this point in the 80s hadn't really happened yet. I mean, thrash was a brand new thing. I think Metallica coming out in 83 was the first real thrash album. And this was the cool part about the 1980s. You had new bands, or not only new bands, but new genres of metal spinning out of other ones every year or two. Like, by the beginning of the decade, you had black metal coming out with bands like Venom and Bathory. You had the rise of speed and power metal in the late 70s, early 80s with bands like Accept, and in the case of power metal, bands like Halloween in the mid 80s. And then on the other side of the house, you had thrash coming out, and by 88, you have death metal fully formed. Like, this was really like just the high point of the genre, where it was just everybody was creating something different and new. And did all of it work? No. And it's like the creation of any industry. Look at the creation of airplanes. Go on YouTube sometime and like look up some video footage of some of the contraptions that people were trying to build in like the late 1800s before the Wright brothers succeeded. It is hilarious the number of ways people failed to build airplanes. And in the case of music, they found a lot of guys are finding stuff that works for them and just trying to create something new and different because they want to. And it all kind of came to a head in 1990, really, where a ton of bands released some of their best output ever. And then most of them went on hiatus for the rest of the decade because for whatever reason, whether it be the record labels or just public opinion or whatever, metal was no longer the in thing, and it all just kind of went away for a while. And it's coming back now. In fact, a lot of newer bands are coming out with new material, and a lot of the older bands are coming back out with brand new stuff. Like I covered last week, the new Overkill record, which kicks ass. And it's not like a lot of the classic rock bands, not to cast shade at them. Those guys are some of the greatest bands who've ever been formed. But a lot of them were only around for 6 or 7 years and then either went away or they've come back decades later and tried to keep going. And yeah, a lot of them don't sound all that great anymore. Rolling Stones, I'm looking at you. But yeah, it's a super interesting period in metal history. And, on my actual rock and roll history streams, we are probably going to get to this point eventually. I really like doing it, and you guys seem to really enjoy watching it, so I'm probably going to get into the subgenres. I think the next episode we're going to be going into the rise of hard rock and heavy metal, in like the late 60s. And then we'll get into the first wave of metal, probably the punk movement, all the way up into 1980. And then we'll see where it goes from there. Because there's all of this stuff, more than you could talk about in a single stream, but I kind of try to keep it to one stream per topic usually. And if we need to, we can go revisit it later. But it's a really cool period, and ever since I've started doing this rock and roll stream, it's hilarious. Where it's like I figured it was kind of more like a branching. No, it's just this massive spider web of influences all over the shop. Like some of the influencers from Megadeth. Yeah, you have Judas Priest and Motorhead and Diamond Head and a couple of other guys, but you also have like Elvis Presley in there. So it's really interesting to talk about. And, vocally, the funny part is like Dave is not that great a singer, but his voice is perfect for this style. Because you don't need a guy who sounds like a good singer. You sound like a guy who's pissed off and ain't going to take it anymore. And Dave can do that because he kind of is that guy. But yeah, I mean, the second album is an immortal classic. And if you haven't listened to it yet, first of all, where have you been? And second of all, listen to it. It's freaking awesome. And again, some bands would fall off at this point. And then Megadeth didn't. They came up with So Far, So Good, So What? And that's one of the most accurate titles I've ever heard for probably their attitude at this period of, yeah, we're doing really well so far. Okay, what's next? Because, for any kind of artist or people who produce content like that, once it's done, you're like, okay, that's in the can. People are going to do with what they're going to do with it. Well, let's move on to the next thing. And this is a pretty raw album. I love it. It's much less. You can really hear the influences on the second wave of black metal in here, because a lot of the time signatures and rhythms and stuff like that are very similar. There's a lot of covers on this record. There's a lot of songs on this record that other people have covered or used as an inspiration. That's how I wanted to say that. I'm like, wait, that didn't sound right. But as of 1988, these guys are still kicking ass, still taking names, and really doing a bang up job of it. And there's really not a song I can point to on these records I can say I objectively dislike. I mean, some of it's better than others, but Peace Sells is lights out pretty much the whole way through. So Far, So Good, So What? I don't think the quality is as good as Peace Sells, but it's still a really solid album. So I can full-heartedly recommend you go listen to it. I mean, all three of them, really. I've been listening to it the past hour and a half here before the show, and I didn't even notice I had just been going from album to album. It was really cool, and these guys are really just one of the greats, and they've earned their spot in the Big Eight. I think is my preferred way of referring to that, because the Big Four, there's some bands in there that really should be, or some bands in the scene that really should be up in that category and aren't, because you have Anthrax, Megadeth, Metallica, and Slayer. They're the Big Four, but I think Exodus and Testament belong in there too, and probably Overkill and a couple of others. And Death Angel I hear a lot. I don't disagree with that. So I think cutting it down to a Big Four kind of does a disservice to a lot of the other top tier thrash acts out there. And, that's why I do things like this, so I can talk to you guys about it. And we'll continue to do so, because I've been on a bit of a thrash kick lately. And I think next week is May 7th. Yes, May 7th. I have a surprise for you all. I know you guys have been trying to get me into death metal for a long, long time, and I've been avoiding it because I haven't been the biggest fan of death metal in the past. But that's changing next week because we are going to talk about a, a band I just kind of stumbled upon in for, a couple of ways, and I've resisted it for a long time, but I'm just going to do it because I'm actually having a lot of fun with their music. Next week, we are going to be covering some of the works of Bolt Thrower, great English death metal band. And I can't wait for you guys to get a hold of that and see and really dig into it. We should have a couple of guests for that one, maybe even Nick Weiser if the schedules work out. But if not, you'll still have my happy ass sitting here talking and telling you what I think about it. And in the meantime, next week, I can't say when because I haven't uploaded it yet, but I will be doing a standalone review over on Rumble, where I'll be going over Sabaton's cover of 1916. And unlike on here, this is the way I always wanted to do this show, but YouTube won't let us do it. I'm going to be playing the video in the background or the audio and then telling you what I think. So, and pointing stuff out along the way here and there. So I really hope you'll join me for that. Maybe I'll have a guest to help me with that. If not, it'll be like our original reviews on here where it's just me going through it and giving you my opinion and telling you what to look for and all that. And other than that, you can always catch me Mondays on 70s Rock Fans channel for It's Only Talk and Roll, which he just got monetized. So huge shout out to him. It's a big step. And then Fridays, you can sometimes catch me on the MFR Cocktail Lounge. And if you don't follow me on Rumble, go follow me on Rumble because I'm going to be doing a lot more content over there, I think, in the near future. Because YouTube has become really limiting and really just doesn't let me do what I want to do with this show. And Rumble does, at least for now. So I'm not shutting my YouTube channel down. I'll still be doing this every week and stuff like that, but I will be doing content that's only on the Rumble side. So if you're a fan of the show and want to really get into it, I would follow me over there because we're going to be doing some stuff that's a lot cooler than I'm allowed to on here because YouTube hates fun. And with that all being said, take care, guys. Stay safe. I love you all, and I'll catch you next time.